kind of themed questions there. So the first one, which matchup this week are you most thankful for?
Elijah Moore going up against the Houston Texans. I know we were talking about the Jets last segment, but I think Elijah Moore is the one Jet that you could start fully with confidence. In his last 5 games, he has at least 6 targets in all of them, double-digit fantasy points in each. And in 2 of his last 3 games, he is top 27 fantasy points. Now he takes on a weak Houston Texans secondary that gives up a lot of fantasy points, gives up a lot of yards. 179 yards per game to receivers, the 6th most in the NFL. So I think Elijah Moore, who is proven to be quarterback proof, I think he could have a good game this week, and I would start him with confidence.
Yeah, it's been nice to see them actually just funnel targets to him. And I know that, a few weeks ago they said they weren't going to do anything special to get him extra looks. Maybe they're not. Maybe he's just getting open and they're finding him. But whatever, I'm down with that. The matchup that I am most thankful for is Deebo Samuel going against the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, Deebo has been amazing. I sort of, I'm glad in a way. I drafted him in the Scott Fish Bowl this year, mostly because I missed out on Brandon Ayuk. That's the guy that I wanted. Somebody else got there ahead of me, and so I was like, all right, I guess I'll take Deebo Samuel. And now he's the guy that's sort of carrying that team. But this week he's got a great matchup against the Vikings, who are giving up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. So we know that he can do it catching the football. We learned that he can do it running the football. We saw that last week. He had more yards in that game than I think Trey Sermon has had in like a number of games combined. Either way, the Niners they have made him the centerpiece of the offense. He is what we thought Brandon Ayuk was going to be. And now this week he gets a very, very favorable matchup in an offense that's really clicking lately and needs to pile up some wins as they stay in the race for the wild card in the NFC. So I'm looking forward for the best for Deebo Samuel this week. All right. Because it is Thanksgiving and a lot of us will be getting our fat on, which player is going to feast this week?
James Robinson. James Robinson is in a position where he gets a lot of touches each and every week, but a lot of the times the Jaguars are trailing, so later in the game they have to get away from the run. That might not be the case this week against an Atlanta Falcons team that has really been struggling. So not only do I think it could be a positive game script for James Robinson, it is a great matchup. The Falcons allow the 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs. We know that Robinson is going to be used near the goal line, that he's going to get a bunch of touches, that he's going to get used in the passing game. So all of that paired with this really good matchup, I love James Robinson this week.
I just love the fact that even if it took a couple of weeks, like Urban Meyer was like, hey, we have a pretty good running back, like maybe we should use him. So that's been really nice to see. The guy that I think is going to feast this week, it's another running back. It is David Montgomery for the Chicago Bears. And we talked about their passing game earlier with Andy Dalton expected to start and not sure what's going to be with Allen Robinson. We do know David Montgomery is going to be there, and we know that he's going to get the football, and he's got an excellent matchup against the Detroit Lions, who defensively one of the worst teams in the league. They are one of the most friendly matchups when it comes to fantasy running backs. 3rd most fantasy points per game allowed to the position. They've given up 10 rushing touchdowns. They've also given up 7 receiving touchdowns. So maybe there's a chance for Montgomery to do some damage as a pass catcher as well. But regardless, I expect this is going to be a game where the Bears are going to want to be run heavy just to sort of take some of the pressure off the quarterback situation. And I think they'll be able to run it early, often, and effectively against the Lions this week. So I'm looking for him to have a pretty big week. Who will be in a food coma? Who's just going to be laid out on our fantasy couch, not doing anything, making us wish that they weren't there? Who's going to be basically a bust this week?
This is a guy that I believe we've seen eat a turkey drumstick.
I believe so, yes.
It is Mark Ingram, Saints running back, and it partially because he has not practiced this week. I know he's dealing with the knee injury, so that is always worrisome. But also, it is a tough matchup against the Bills. On the year, the Bills have allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points to running backs. But coming into last week, it was the lowest. Jonathan Taylor just exploded for 5 touchdowns and 50 fantasy points. If you take away that one Jonathan Taylor performance, the Bills have allowed 5 touchdowns to running backs all year. So they're stingy against the run, and if he's not fully healthy, maybe we see more Tony Jones, you even have to worry about him suiting up this week. So I'm very, very concerned about Mark Ingram right now.
You talk about the touchdowns that the Bills have given up on the ground. I believe of the 10 touchdowns, I think it is, I think 8 of them have been between Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor.
I don't think Mark Ingram is the same as those two.
I don't think so. I mean, look, he and Derrick Henry went to the same college, but that's about it. That's
where it ends.
That's kind of where it ends. I got another running back as well. I think Josh Jacobs is not going to have a particularly great week. The Cowboys, one of their big improvements this year has been on the defensive side of the football. And even in the game they lost last week against Kansas City, it wasn't like they were gashed by the Chiefs, right? We spent the week talking about how the Chiefs' offense is back, how everything looks like it's going to be fine again. And after they scored kind of early, the Cowboys did a good job of shutting them down. They held them to 19 points. And I think they're going to have a tough time, or the Raiders are going to have a tough time, I should say, moving the football, trying to score points. And I also have a feeling they might be in a negative game script here, right? The Cowboys have spent the last few days hearing about how they only scored 9 points, what's wrong with the Cowboys. And even without Amari Cooper, we'll see if CeeDee Lamb is there. I still think they can find a way to move the football to score points and maybe put the Raiders in a negative game script. So I understand you might be in a situation where you have to play Josh Jacobs. We know running back is thin right now, but I don't really like his outcome for this game. So just beware of Josh Jacobs if you are starting him.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and the thing is, we always say, oh, why don't they throw him the ball more? Last week they tried. 7 targets. He turned it into 24 yards. That's why they don't throw him the ball more.
That's why they don't. Sometimes you just have to learn the hard way.